Serana, Skyrim's most beloved companion and its most psychologically complex. Serana isn't just a vampire, she's a woman forged by trauma, frozen in time, and fractured in self. She walks beside the Dragonborn with wit and poise, but beneath that calm exterior is centuries of silence, pain, and repression. She's not just interesting, she's tragic, a relic of another era sealed in stone, now wandering a world that no longer knows her. But psychoanalytically, Serana is far more than a sorrowful sidekick. She's a portrait of psychological stasis, a woman frozen not only in time, but in development. Her vampirism, trauma, and prolonged isolation have arrested her emotional growth, leaving her in a purgatory of self. She presents as composed and sarcastic, but beneath that lies a fractured sense of being, one that has been shaped by external forces far more than internal choices. Her wit functions as a buffer against vulnerability. Her calm exterior conceals layers of repression, loss, and a fragile grasp on personal agency. In this analysis, we'll explore how Serana's psychological architecture was shaped and then stalled by trauma, immortality, and powerlessness. We'll dig past the image of a captivating vampire to uncover the mechanisms she uses to survive, the inner conflicts that define her, and the unconscious drives that push her toward reclaiming a self that was never truly hers to begin with. Serana's story begins long before the Dragonborn stumbles upon Dim Hollow Crypt. Born into immense privilege, her family was not just wealthy, but powerful in ways few mortals could comprehend. Her father, the ancient vampire Lord Harkon, pursued an unholy transformation to gain immortality, offering himself, his wife, and his own daughter as a living sacrifice to Molag Bal. The ritual to become a daughter of Coldharbour was not metaphorical. It involved being violated by the Daedric Prince of Domination, in what Serana later describes as a degrading and horrifying experience. It wasn't only strength she was given, it was a violent, dehumanizing rite of domination, sanctified in unholy communion with Molag Bal, signed in her blood and his pleasure. She didn't choose vampirism. It was inflicted upon her, branded into her body and her soul under the guise of legacy, cloaked in twisted promises of eternal life. After her transformation, the family dynamic grew as dark as the Daedric Prince of Domination himself. Her mother, Valerica, perhaps rationalized the decision as a means to secure Serana's future, but her father's hunger for power consumed what little was left of their humanity. Serana lived in a household defined by control, manipulation, and fear, where autonomy was a threat to order and obedience was mistaken for love. In response to her father's apocalyptic ambitions, Valerica hid Serana away, locking her in a tomb and disappearing into another realm. When Serana awakens centuries later, she finds herself in a new reality. Her previous world gone, her family fractured, and her purpose unclear. She enters this modern world with the appearance of confidence, but without any clear sense of belonging. She recalls names, events, and even strategies, yet the self behind those memories is distant, almost dissociated. She has knowledge, only with little clarity, history, but with little identity. And yet she adapts quickly. She travels with the Dragonborn, makes her own decisions, and breathes in the spirit of the Fourth Era, all with a guarded presence. She's never fully open, not in a hostile way, but in a sense of not being sure what she would say even if she did open herself up. Her humor masks something quieter, a person shaped by forces she never consented to, re-entering a world that never asked for her return. Beneath Serana's poise lies a complex, fractured psyche. Her most defining traits don't leap out through dramatic monologues or emotional outbursts. Instead, they surface subtly, through what she doesn't say, through what she sidesteps, through how she reacts to silence, power, and intimacy. The first trait in her psychological profile is emotional repression. Serana rarely speaks directly about her feelings. Even when discussing the horrors of her past, she uses understatements, sarcasm, and redirection. This isn't indifference to what happened to her, despite it seeming that way. What it actually is emotional armor. In Freudian terms, this is repression in its purest form. Intolerable emotional content is pushed out of conscious awareness, not because it lacks importance, but because fully engaging with it would destabilize her carefully managed control. Her humor and composure serve not as expressions of confidence, but as fortifications against psychological collapse. She is calm because she must be calm. Otherwise, the repercussions of her past may sink their teeth in just a little bit deeper. This mindset leads into her avoidant attachment style, which object relations theory helps us understand. From an early age, Serana's relational objects, her parents, were sources of betrayal and violation rather than safety. In a household where love was conditional and intimacy was dangerous, she learned to suppress her need for connection. Even as she grows closer to the Dragonborn, her warmth is filtered through detachment. She often speaks at people, rarely with them. Her barriers aren't just emotional, they're existential. To let someone in would mean allowing them to see just how little of herself she feels in control of. These traits compound into identity diffusion, perhaps her most foundational of wounds. According to Erikson, a psychoanalyst known for his theory on psychosocial development, adolescence is marked by a psychosocial task, and that task is the formation of a coherent identity. But Serana's development was interrupted and then frozen. She was turned into a vampire and sealed away during a crucial stage of psychological development. According to Erikson, this stage is marked by the core psychosocial crisis of identity formation, a crisis Serana was never given the chance to resolve. When she re-enters the world, she functions, but she doesn't know who she is. She defines herself in reaction to others, her father's pawn, her mother's burden, the Dragonborn's companion. She's a character in search of authorship, unsure whether she belongs to the past she escaped or the future she doesn't yet trust. And finally, woven through all of this is a subtle form of hypervigilance, often misunderstood as mere sarcasm or aloofness. But this constant edge, this careful monitoring of others' words and intentions, is the psychological residue of trauma. It's a trauma response in a low-boil state, always present, never spoken. Serana isn't looking for danger in the physical world. She's scanning for the emotional kind, betrayal, pressure, or demands of vulnerability. Her guard is always up because experience has taught her that it has to be. These traits don't make Serana weak. On the contrary, they make her incredibly resilient. But they also trap her, suspending her between who she might have been and who she's still too guarded to become. Beneath Serana's restraint lies fear, not the cinematic kind that leads to shrieking or running, but the slow, internal erosion that shapes how she connects to the world. Her fears are deeply rooted and intimately formative, the silent architects of her personality. At the heart of it all is a fear of powerlessness, not in the physical sense, but emotional and existential. Serana was violated, transformed, and sealed away, all without her consent. Her autonomy was stolen by those who claimed to love her. She was not merely a victim of circumstance. She was a casualty of intention. That history instilled in her the persistent dread that no matter how composed she appears, someone else might seize control of her again. Her refusal to open up, her emotional containment, it's all a defense against repeating the non-consensual terror she once endured. Closely tied to this is the fear of intimacy, not because she doesn't crave connection, but because she believes that intimacy comes with a price. For Serana, to be close to someone is to risk being used, betrayed, or exposed. In her experience, love is not safety, it's leverage. She's learned that those who get closest can cause the deepest harm, and so her self-protective instinct is to stay just out of reach, not to be absent, but to be unreachable. And then there is a more abstract but equally potent insecurity, the fear that she has no self. Stripped of control over her past and alienated from the present, Serana exists in limbo. She plays roles, the brazen daughter, the reluctant vampire, the observant companion, but doesn't fully believe in any of them. There's an unspoken anxiety that without these roles, there might be nothing underneath. That she is not unfinished, but totally empty. This quiet dread drives her constant restraint. If she never fully reveals herself, she never has to face the possibility that there is nothing to reveal. Even when she shows flashes of warmth or assertiveness, they're measured, carefully rationed expressions of self, always held back by the fear that too much authenticity will leave her vulnerable to the same violations that broke her centuries ago. Serana's internal world is not just wounded, it's shattered. She is a mind at war with remnants of herself, caught between fading impulses of her long-gone humanity and her inability to form a single enduring identity. This psychological tension is not loud or volatile. It's quiet, chronic, and enduring, but it shapes everything she does. The first and most enduring conflict is between her desire for connection and her fear of vulnerability. Serana is not emotionally deadened. She feels deeply. We see glimpses of genuine warmth, empathy, and even longing in her conversations with the Dragonborn. But every time intimacy approaches, she instinctively recoils. This mirrors the behavior documented by psychologist Mary Ainsworth in her Strange Situation study, where infants with avoidant attachment styles would appear calm in their caregiver's absence, but showed no desire for reunion upon their return. The child suppresses emotional expression to avoid further disappointment. Serana, centuries older, displays a similar pattern. She withholds vulnerability not because she doesn't feel, but because expressing it has historically led to pain. Her body may stand beside you, but her soul keeps its distance, negotiating the tension between longing and fear in every interaction. Closely tied to this is a second conflict, the war between repression and reemergence. Serana has spent centuries suppressing emotional content being too dangerous to confront. But now, with the reawakening of her autonomy, however fragile, those repressed emotions begin to stir. Her sarcasm becomes a little less effective, her detachment a little less stable. The past, once buried, starts pushing upward through the cracks in her composure. She is no longer sealed in a tomb, but her psyche is. And part of her knows, if that seal breaks, she may not be able to handle what comes out. The third and perhaps most tragic conflict is between identity performance and authentic selfhood. Serana plays her aforementioned roles out of necessity, but behind each role is a hollow heart. She doesn't reject these personas outright, but she doesn't believe in them either. They're scaffolding where a self should be. She fears that without them, there's nothing stable inside. To live authentically would mean risking exposure to the void of self. So she continues to function efficiently, intelligently, and even compassionately, but never fully. Her actions are real, her intentions sincere, yet they remain filtered through a carefully moderated presentation of self. Every moment of closeness, every act of trust is navigated with careful reservation, and the weight of that caution is crushing. Serana is a woman torn not by one great decision, but by 1,000 silent negotiations, each one between the part of her that wants to be known and the part of her that believes being known is too dangerous to survive. Serana is not who she is by accident. She is who she is because her psyche has built structures to keep her from collapsing. Her mind, as fractured as it is still fighting to preserve some meaning of self. But it doesn't do so openly. It does so through defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies used to protect the ego from psychological harm. The most dominant mechanism Serana exhibits is repression, a classic Freudian defense in which threatening emotions are buried before they can reach consciousness. This is not the same as forgetting. It's active exclusion. As we've seen, Serana rarely speaks about her past in emotional terms, even when prompted. Her description of the Cold Harbor ritual, one of the most horrific ceremonies a person can endure, is filtered through dispersion and understatement. This is not emotional numbness. It's a psychological lid clamped down over something too dangerous to feel. In clinical settings, repression is often paired with intellectualization, another mechanism Serana demonstrates. She discusses pain without appearing in pain, turning emotional material into abstract commentary. When she does speak about family, betrayal, or even death, she does so with detachment, often masked by sarcasm. The humor isn't frivolous, it's functional. It allows her to keep talking without getting too close to what might break her. As defense theory notes, intellectualization protects against overwhelming effect by shifting the threat from emotional content to cognitive dissonance. Then there is avoidance, a staple of her attachment pattern. Psychologically, avoidance isn't just about physical withdrawal, it's about disengagement from the emotional present. Serana stands in proximity, but she does not offer herself. Even when she seems open, she is modulating what part of her can be seen. This is a learned behavior consistent with avoidant attachment styles observed in adult relational studies, where closeness is regulated not by comfort but by threat management. Serana's avoidance isn't passive, it's a shield crafted by a child who learned early that closeness is a liability. She also shows signs of reaction formation, though more subtly. Reaction formation occurs when a person expresses the opposite of what they feel to defend against the unacceptable emotion. In Serana's case, moments of vulnerability are often immediately followed by dismissiveness or sarcasm. A rare moment of softness might be walked back with a dry comment or a subtle jab. She's not lying, she's defending. It's easier to be witty than wounded. These defenses do not make her inauthentic. They make her wounded and adaptive. Serana's mind has built pillars to keep her upright in the face of unspeakable dislocation. But these very mechanisms, repression, intellectualization, avoidance, reaction formation, they also keep her locked in place. They protect her from breaking. However, they also keep her from healing. Serana's behavior from the moment she is awakened is shaped not by impulse, but by defense. She does not act rashly, nor does she act openly. Everything is calculated, not as attempts to manipulate you, but as contingencies to protect herself. Her interactions with the world are filtered through the lens of preservation. She must preserve control, composure, and the pieces of self that haven't yet been proclaimed. One of her most noticeable patterns is her controlled proximity. Serana will walk beside you, she will fight with you, she will share observations, even memories. But she rarely, if ever, offers emotional transparency. Conversations with her often pivot before they get too personal. When asked directly about her feelings, she'll deflect. When trust is extended, she tests its durability with wit. This pattern mirrors the behavioral model of avoidant attachment in adults, where individuals remain near others but struggle to let themselves be known. Another recognizable pattern is her selective agency. Serana is capable as a warrior and a woman. She makes decisions, offers insight, and is never portrayed as a passive companion. But she only asserts herself in a carefully chosen space. She does not seek leadership, nor does she demand control. Her voice emerges when the conversation turns towards her father or the prophecy he chases, or her future, but even then, it's measured. Her restraint is not submission, it's strategic. The fewer demands she makes, the less she risks being denied. Her humor functions similarly. It is her most accessible tool for self-regulation. When a situation becomes tense or vulnerable, Serana uses sarcasm as a release valve, easing the pressure without addressing its source. This isn't random. It's the behavioral form of reaction formation, tension transformed into wit, so that the pain remains disguised. Over time, these behaviors form a pattern of regulated distance, a carefully curated way of existing in the world. And this is where Serana begins to resemble an archetype not unlike Persephone, the daughter of Zeus and queen of the underworld. Persephone, too, was taken against her will. She, too, was reshaped by forces beyond her control, kidnapped by Hades and forced to be his bride. Like Serana, she is neither entirely victim nor entirely sovereign. She exists between, haunted by what was done to her and yet formidable in her own right. Alternatively, Serana can be seen in the same lineage as survivors of real-world trauma, those who become hyperfunctional, even charismatic, but whose inner life remains sealed behind layers of practiced response. In clinical settings, this is sometimes called functional dissociation, a state in which a person performs normalcy while keeping their true self out of reach, even from themselves. Serana's behavioral patterns do not emerge randomly. They are the echoes of her psychological architecture, repressive, avoidant, and self-protective, and tragically consistent. What the world sees as mysterious or distant is not a lack of personality. It's a survival strategy. Serana is not simply a tragic character. She is a psychological survivor, crafted by trauma, sustained by defense, and held together by sheer will. What we meet in the tomb at Dim Hollow is not a whole person, but the remains of one. Someone who has spent her life learning how not to fall apart. She is emotionally repressed because feeling fully would mean reliving what she was never allowed to process. She is avoidantly attached because closeness once cost her everything. She is diffused in identity because the normal path of becoming was stolen from her and replaced with roles chosen by others. She is hypervigilant not out of paranoia but out of memory, because the worst things in her life came not from strangers, but from the people who said they loved her. And yet, through all of this, Serana functions. She speaks, she fights, she cares, she adapts. But it is all filtered, curated, and restrained, because beneath her calm exterior is a woman navigating every moment with the invisible calculus of someone who knows that being known can be dangerous. Serana is not a static character. She is adaptive to the core, reshaping herself constantly to survive each new setting, each new relationship, and each new expectation. She is 1,000 shards of the same person, reorganized into someone new in every situation, never fake, but never whole. That is what makes Serana so compelling. She is not the vampire princess of legend, nor simply the daughter of Harkon and Valerica. She is what remains after identity is fractured, trust is betrayed, and time forgets your name. And in that brokenness, she finds a strange resilience, not loud, not bright, but necessary for survival. She may never fully heal, but in the quiet defiance of her broken soul, she doesn't need to. As an immortal vampire, she is destined to reform herself again and again in an undying existence.